Okay, hello everybody. We're going to start our Zoom evening talk show right now. It's our 9th talk show that we've done this past 2021. And I'm very happy to see everybody. And I'm going to ask you all to mute yourselves. The rule of the game for Zoom is that everybody stays muted unless you're talking. So I should be the only one that is not muted right now. So it's great to see everybody from the different provinces. I apologize that it's a late start for Manitoba and Ontario. I know it's 8 o'clock there. Probably Fred Wright is in his pajamas already, but 6 o'clock is too early because it's supper time. So we've got to go with the 7 o'clock. So Ken, I'm going to ask you to put that picture up on the screen.
Gail Marie, we're all in the same time zone.
Right now.
Oh,
right now.
Right. Thank you for that. Okay, so you're probably wondering about the unusual title I put on our talk show, A Tinker, a Tailor, a Bow-Legged Sailor. That is a nursery rhyme skipping jump rope song that I used to sing when I was little. I don't know how many of you know it, but I thought it was an appropriate start to our vocational service because in this, tinker, tailor, bow-legged sailor, rich man, poor man, beggar man, a thief, soldier, doctor, whatever it was, all refer to vocations. And when you do it as a skip jump rope song, they go to the beat and that helps them to stay balanced. So I think in Rotary, we have all of those vocations represented and it helps us to stay balanced and be diverse in our membership. So that is why we called it a tinker, a tailor, a bow-legged sailor, for a healthy balance in life between Rotary and your personal lives and within your Rotary clubs. Okay, Ken? So that leads us into a history part of our lesson. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how vocational service was created in Rotary. It was the classification system, as we all know. It was introduced back in Paul Harris's day. And it was to ensure that a Rotary Club had a cross-section of professions represented so that they reflected the whole business community as a whole. So the idea was that they would have different people from different professions. Now, our own John Borse actually wrote an article in April 2012 that I came across. And he said the title of the article, Rotary's Classification System, Make It Relevant or Dump It. And John agreed with the principle behind the classification system, the goal of creating a club of diversity, and the implication is that the greater diversity in a club, the stronger is a club. And that's so relevant for us today. We have our diversity, equity, inclusion goals now in Rotary in 2021. And John was a little ahead of his time, but the classification system has changed greatly. There's no longer any yays or nays. We can put our whatever we want on our badges as our vocation, but the principle still stands that we should be diverse. Now, Paul Harris started Rotary, as we all know, in 1905. And one of the reasons, and I'm going to quote him, he had a desire for camaraderie among business associates. And so he brought together these four men, and eventually that led to our International Organization of Service and Fellowship. We now are 1.2 million strong. Paul Harris was an attorney. Laura was a mining engineer. Shorey was a merchant tailor, and Shield was a coal dealer. And they were the four that first met. And then there's sometimes called a fifth Rotarian, Harry Ruggles, and he was a printer. And incidentally, he printed the first issue of the Rotary magazine and the first Rotary songbook. So that was our beginnings of vocational service. Now, if Patty can bring up the poll, I want to ask you all a couple of questions about your vocational service. Can you do that, Patty? So if you all hit poll, you can answer those questions. Number one, do you know the vocation of your club president? You can say yes or no. Number two, have you presented your vocation talk to your club? Number three, is there a lawyer, a doctor, or an accountant in your club? That one's kind of a joke, by the way. And there is a fourth one, if we can scroll up. Can you get to the fourth question?
I think each viewer can scroll it up themselves.
Over on the right-hand side, you just pull that thing down and you can get to it.
You're right. Has your vocation better enabled you to help with your club service projects, either local or international? So there we are seeing all the results. People are still voting, looks like. So over 80 some of us have presented our vocation talks to our clubs, and that's good. It's one way for your club members to get to know you. %. And quite a few of us have either a lawyer, a doctor, or an accountant in our club. It's kind of a joke because when people think of Rotary in the past, they think of old white guys sitting around discussing stuff, and there was always usually a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer or an accountant in the club. And has your vocation enabled you to help with club service projects, local and international? That's great that 88% have said that, yes, they have. I think Rotary's belief is that our vocations can provide the basis for service. Essentially, whatever our vocation is, it's represented in our club, and we are kind of an ambassador of our vocation to our club, and vice versa. We're an ambassador of Rotary to our vocations. So I think vocational service is really important. And there's so many different facets of vocational service. And several of the facets deal with local service that we do, and others deal with some of our international programs. So now I'm going to call upon Tony Sheard. Tony is going to share with us his Vocational Ideas Bank. Tony is the past district governor of District 6330 in Ontario, a member of Southampton, Ontario Rotary Club, and he's had a lot of experience with vocational service. He told me to not take long to introduce him because I'd be wasting people's time, and he wants to get right at it. So if you would put yourselves on speaker view, and we will listen to Tony and what he has to say about vocational service.
So thank you, Gail Marie, for that kind introduction. And good evening, everybody. And I just love the power of Zoom, where you can interact across district boundaries from the comfort of our own homes. And I want to say a special shout out to my past district of my classmate, Fred Wright, who's on the call too. So hi, Fred. I was a little taken aback when I was approached just 5 days ago by your district governor to speak on the subject of vocational service. And I was fascinated why she'd asked me. And she said she'd been doing some research, and she Googled vocational service, and some work that I'd done in 2010 popped up on the screen. I assembled an ideas bank for vocational service at that time, and I updated it again in 2018. So, but like all past district governors, we love to talk and share stories. So this evening I will do a number of things. I'll tell you about myself, a little bit more about myself, talk to you about this avenue of service, why I created the Ideas Bank. I'll give you some examples of what vocational service is, and I will pose you the question, is vocational service really an avenue of service? And finally, I'm going to join one of your breakouts, and if you've got any questions, I'm up for that too. So you probably guessed from the accent, I come from the UK. I've lived in Canada for the past 20 years, and I've held various senior positions in HR and business in the power generation sector, both in the UK, USA, North Africa, and more recently in Canada. I've been a Rotarian since October 2008, and my first association with Rotary goes back to 1977, when I became the founding president of a Rotaract club in the UK. So I'm one of these 5% people who moves across from Rotaract to Rotary. When I was too old for that, I became an active roundtabler, which is an association for young men between up to the ages of 40, which is similar to Rotary in a sense when it does fellowship and community service. So how did I get involved with vocational service? in 2010, our incoming district governor at that time wanted to focus on vocational service. And he just simply asked me to take on the district vocational service chair role. And so I asked him, well, what did he expect of the role and what was his sort of thoughts? And he said, I trust you to go and figure it out. So I don't think he really knew, but he said, get on and do it. And as a Rotarian of only 2 years standing, I went off and did what I was told. Many Rotarians struggle with the concept of vocational service, and I was no different. And so I first turned to the dictionary as a first point of call. And just to let you know, vocation is defined as the particular occupation for which you are trained. And service is defined as a work done by one person or group that benefits another. So how does that fit with Rotary? Well, it was being mentioned earlier that vocational service is the basic foundation upon which our membership in Rotary was originally based. And specifically, the means to encourage Rotarians to serve others through their vocations and practice high ethical standards. But more simply, I always like to think it's using our time and talents to help others. And the question today is, how do we do that? Some have said you pick up the vocational portfolio in your club when you are new or you're on your way out. It's a cul-de-sac, you might say. And nobody really expects too much of you because nobody really knows what it is anyway. So while in 2010, I fitted into the first category, I was a new guy in the block, but I was new to the district and I was going to give it my best shot. Some refer to it as the lost avenue of service and others the abandoned avenue. You may recall, some of you, that the Broadway play and the movie, The Prisoner of Second Avenue. Whatever your personal view is, I hope to help you re-energize your approach to vocational service and help your district and clubs put it at the heart of our organization where it truly belongs. At induction, all new members receive their classification, and it's not the same as it used to be in the old days, and Rotarians are urged to protect the ideals of Rotary and their vocations. It is the ideal of Rotary to put Rotary values to work where you work and into your life. So what is your vocational service responsibility and how do you discharge it? If you cast your mind back when you were inducted, something like this was probably said in your induction ceremony. You have been chosen for membership of the Rotary Club of XYZ because your fellow members believe you to be a leader in your business or profession. So what does a good leader do? In every business or profession, a leader sets the direction, maintains and continually raises the standard of ethics and professionalism and workmanship in the organization. And through leadership and by example, professionals help others to develop their full potential and to raise the standards of those around them. And we can discharge our vocational service responsibilities in many ways, such as setting and maintaining and continually striving to raise standards of ethics, professionalism and workmanship in our own personal performance, the wider community where each of us works and lives, and helping others to find vocations and new careers. Through vocational service, we are expected to adhere to and promote high ethical standards in all our business dealings, recognize the worthiness of all occupations, and contribute our professional expertise, skills, and various talents to addressing societal problems and needs, whether they be at home or abroad. Rotarians are referred to as leaders in their vocations. However, ethics is a challenge for all of us. And many have said there has never been a greater need for service than now. And I would say with recent events, there's never been a greater need to restore ethical behavior in our global society. I'll now illustrate some traits of good leaders. For example, honesty, courtesy, justice, and understanding, just to take 4. And if we take each in turn, honesty. In terms of justice, we often say justice not only needs to be done, it needs to be seen to be done. It is the same with honesty. Everything we do or say personally in our companies or in our daily life must be seen as honest. Is it the truth? Courtesy. How much does a smile cost? If we truly believe in the recognition of the worthiness of all useful occupations, why should we be discourteous to anyone? That should not imply that we should be subservient or agree for the sake of agreeing. It simply says we can agree to disagree and can be respected for our honesty and courteously expressed difference of opinion. Justice. what was it that aroused the greatest resentment to us as children, probably to us now as adults? A feeling that we've been treated unfairly. So remember that in all your dealings, it is fair to all concerned. Is it fair to all concerned? Finally, understanding. In exercising your executive powers, it is useful to try and put yourself in the other person's position. Try to understand their point of view and then ask, how would I react if I was spoken to like that? This leads us nicely to review the four-way test. And in all our dealings, ethics underpins the undertakings and principal tenet of Rotary, which is the four-way test, which, as you know, was created in 1932 by Herbert J. Taylor and has stood the test of time. I don't need to recite it to you today, but it's something we should practice in our daily lives when we are living and breathing and set the standards for vocational service. In many respects, we contribute vocational service in many of the projects we carry out in our clubs, but we do not recognize it as such. So take time to reflect when you undertake your various projects, whether it be local or on the international scene, what vocational attributes contributed to the success, and perhaps review, do a post-audit if you like, how you could have done it better next time if you'd fully exploited the vocational capabilities at your disposal. To give you some practical examples of tangible things you can do, I will give you access to the District 6330's Ideas Bank. The original ideas came from a sharing of best practice at the Montreal Convention in 2010. This was my first convention, and I went to a breakout session which comprised of over 480 delegates. And it was my first convention, as I said, and I was simply blown away that we had 480 people sharing ideas in a room on vocational service. And I was particularly impressed with the presentation of District 5230 from California, and I came away with renewed vigor for my new portfolio. At a following District 6330 assembly, we shared best practice among our clubs and brainstormed other ideas. And it was that workshop that resulted in the compilation of the ideas list we're talking about. And the document is only 6 pages in length, so it's not an onerous read. And we've categorized over 50 ideas under the following headings. And the headings are awareness in your club, awareness in your workplace, awareness in youth, and now we have a youth service avenue of service. You could argue whether it should go into youth service, but for completeness, we've left it under vocation. Fourthly, awareness in the community, and then finally, awareness for the aged. And I use the categories that the district from California had used in my assembling the data. And so examples of vocational service, I'm not going to go through all the 50, I'll just give you a few because you can read them yourselves and you can take them away with you. We talked about, in the old days, we used to do classification talks. In my club, we now do an Who Am I speech, which is just a short talk where we ask people to answer a few questions about themselves. But in many clubs, people gave their talk several years ago. And sometimes it's useful to ask the older people, redo your talk, because many of the younger members have not heard it. So it's a useful way to do that. The other thing is Rotary was originally about rotating meetings from one organization to another. We've lost that thing. We tend to be very static at the moment, and we're now even more static in the sense with Zoom, but more people come to us because of Zoom. So when the things open up, one of the thoughts you could do is whether you go and have meetings at other premises of your members, or you go as guests to another organization. You can organize career fairs, career workshops for students. You can run mentoring programs. I was only looking, I've been asked to talk about vocational service to a club in Southern Ontario next week. And I just looked on their website and they've just done a mentoring program and established a mentoring program. And this is their passport club, where they are mentoring young professionals and leaders in their community. And they've set up and established their own program to do that. So what a wonderful example of vocational service. You could run an award program or an essay competition on the meaning of the four-way test as a local high school. And and show its relevance in the 21st century. Is it relevant in the 21st century? You can pose those sort of questions and see how they respond. If you Google some of these things, you can see other Rotary clubs or schools will have students who will speak on these subjects. Very powerful messages that come from that. Ethics, we talked about the four-way test and the expectations outlined in the Rotarians Code of Conduct. Some of you will remember that we used to have a declaration of Rotarians in business and professions, and people used to proudly have that in the back of their office or in the front of their store. Well, now we just have the one document, which is a code for all of us, whether we be in your business or not. It's everyone, and that's a really good thing just to remind ourselves of. You can participate in volunteer programs where you can put your vocational talents to work. A good example is our strategic partner being the Habitat for Humanity, and go on a build with those. And Rotary Fellowships. There's loads of work for Rotary Fellowships, from beer tasting, wine tasting, to golf, to sailing, to flying, scouting. There's just legions of them. You can go on Rotary Friendship Exchange. I went on one of those 2 years ago to Croatia, and I'm in regular contact through social media and email and things with the people I met through that program. And some of you will know that last week, unfortunately, they suffered a fairly bad earthquake, which was just near one of the towns that we had visited and one of the clubs we'd visited. And so I've been corresponding to make sure, A, they're all safe, and secondly, arranging to send them some aid to assist them through this time. And so that's just some illustration, and the list goes on. And as I said, there's over 50 in the document I have produced. And but what I would like to challenge you with in exposing the sort of the question is: vocation truly an avenue of service? And in my view, you may be shocked and horrified by I might say that we don't need that avenue of service. But I actually see it as being far more important than an avenue of service, because it's the fundamental foundation that our organization is built upon. We should be applying high ethical standards, using our time and talents to serve our communities at home and around the globe. And it's quite simply the basis of all we do. And I said the Ideas Bank that we've talked about is available online at the District 6330 website. And just simply Google District 6330 Vocational Service, and it'll be your top pick. And if it would be helpful, I can send a soft copy to your district governor, Gail, and so she can circulate it to you. So I'm going to close now and take any questions you have, and I'm very happy to participate in your breakout sessions. So thank you once again for my invitation. I thoroughly enjoyed being part of it, and I look forward to your questions.
Okay. Patty, before we go into breakout rooms, is there anybody that wants to ask Tony a question right away? We are going to be discussing.
You can drop it
we
in.
Are going to, okay, we are going to be discussing that question about avenue of service in the chat rooms, as well as another question. So maybe if you would put up the questions, then we will go into chat rooms, and then Tony can talk to us afterwards. So the questions for the breakout session: what ideas do you like for your club or for you as a Rotarian, and how would you implement them? And should vocational service be an avenue of service? When you get into your breakout rooms, have somebody volunteer to moderate, and maybe somebody else to take notes. Afterwards, after our session tonight, if you send me all the notes, I can recirculate them, because I don't think the notes themselves will be recorded. So those are the two questions for you to look at in your breakout rooms. So enjoy speaking to each other about vocational service. And I think Patty Van is going to put us in breakout rooms now. So I hope everybody had some great discussions. We're not going to have a lot of time tonight to hear from everybody, of course. So if anybody took notes in any of the groups, if you would email them to me, gmanderson@sasktel.net, I will compile them and send them out to everybody with the recording of the meeting. But right now, what we'd like to do, though, is there are 9 groups, actually, and we would like one person from each group to just say what the highlight was in the group. if you could be brief. So Patty's going to call you out. I think
Ed,
Patty
you'll get
and a
it.
trainee.
Yep. Okay. I don't know who was in what group. I have one person's name from each group.
Okay.
So somebody in group one, which was an Anna trainee was in group one. Can somebody report on that, please? I'm going to mute everybody and whoever's speaking, if they can just unmute. So somebody,
Okay.
Kathy, do you want to do it since you had the notes?
Well, I thought you'd be a good fit to talk about it. You don't
Just
want
need
to?
one comment or so. So
Okay, we had very lively discussions and I picked up a lot of great ideas. And so we had one member that they're having from St. Vital for the next 5 weeks, they're having their exchange students that came to them, inbound students, do a talk. And so these are students that are now, past their training and they're now out in the workplace. And so the club members are finding out what happened to those exchange students. I thought that was a great idea.
okay. Thank you, Kathy. Bob Durston's group. Do you have a report? Somebody from Bob's group.
Yeah. Hi, Doug McKenzie from Charleswood. We at the Charleswood Club, we're running sort of a show and tell every week, basically what each member has been doing during the COVID shutdown, and what sort of came up in the conversation, and we'd sort of like to see is something along that line of show and tell for not only new members that are coming into the club, but actually the members that have been in the club for a long time, that we might know that you're an accountant, but we don't know what your history, what your true vocational history was. So we'd like to know from everyone, not just new people coming into the club.
Great. Thanks, Doug. Okay. Anne Graham's group. Someone from Anne's group?
John Denora here. We all thought vocational service, we only got to one question actually, and we did number 2. Vocational service, all 6 of the members that were there felt that vocational service was very important. A good way to get to know other Rotarians, just a good way for fellowship. But some of the members said that their clubs are dropping in membership. They just don't have the resources and the members to focus on the vocational. So it has dropped down the list a little bit where they're focusing on other avenues of service.
Okay. Thanks, John. Brian Braid. Someone in Brian's group.
Well, we started off trying to understand what vocational meant, trying to understand how that applied, because it means something different to everybody. I know that it's a good input from Charles on some of the stuff his club has done, Charles Keppel, at his club, and doing vocational speeches or bringing people in and trying to set up the group so that they're vocational oriented. In other words, if you need an accountant or you need a lawyer, an engineer, you try and draw on those skills. And we talked a little bit about the fact that it's hard to get some people to volunteer to get involved. And of course, then he brought up the other concept, the old concept that volunteers can't refuse. So therefore you just say you and you, and make sure you get them involved in the groups. And it's another way to get involved. So that was interesting. We also talked about reaching out to different groups outside of Rotary, and that was also another concept, and moving forward on that. So we've spent a fair amount of time, because vocation may not be what you want. The vocation that you need may not be what you want. It may maybe just involvement and getting people involved, and I have a hard time trying to figure out how we make that happen.
Thanks, Brian. Dan Sutton, your group's next. Do you have a spokesperson?
Yeah, no, this is Colin Taylor. I'll take it. I think I wrote some notes. Basically, of the group, people in our group, all but 2 are retired. And we talked about what your what avenue of service meant with vocation. And really where we ended up was determining that your vocation helps you in terms of contributing to your Rotary Club. And so Dion in Dryden, he's involved in the court system. And so
Uh-oh.
I'm back.
Sorry.
And so Dion in Dryden is involved in the court system. So in Dryden's club, he's going to be able to add his vocation to the club work that they want to do for youth, service youth. Guy in Kenora is a retired farmer. But we all know that farmers know what they're doing and can react to different circumstances, and they're great organizers and understand that you can't predict weather. And nor can we predict what Rotary is going to do. Dan in Winnipeg is a retired police officer, and he didn't really do a lot of Rotary in terms of being a police officer, but as a police officer, he was able to provide a certain degree of stability, and he gives a couple of examples about ethical behavior that he was able to add to his clubs. Brian and Darlene Cox from Elford. Brian is a retired banker. We agreed, because I'm a retired banker, we agreed that you never forget your skills. And so he's tremendously involved in providing financial management, particularly now in the World Community Service. Wife Brenda is a recently graduated master's candidate in public policy. And so she's bringing some ideas in terms of service to community, and particularly community involvement and the way we do things. And then finally, I was a banker for 25 years and an accountant for 21. And again, I think some of that really helps in terms of how we structure some of the programs we work on. So that was our view in terms of avenues of service and vocation. That's not really what you do in a day job, but what your day job can contribute to the health, strength, and programs in your respective Rotary Club.
Thanks, Colin. Elaine Thompson's group.
Okay, I'm the ghost here. So anyways, I was the one that took the notes, so that way I couldn't talk very much. So Elaine liked that. So anyways, in our group, we concentrate on vocational training primarily, and more to do with students, primarily high school students, thinking that if we worked with a guidance counselor at schools, that they could identify kids that may be interested in certain vocations, and that with our Rotary Club, there are members that could probably help there. And although I didn't get to say it, I think the first thing I'd like to do is take some of them out to a ditch digging area and say, if you don't have an education, this is what you'll be doing for the rest of your life. So go back to school and start to get serious. So the other thing that we think that would help, has helped with vocational training, was our career symposium here in Winnipeg. We also talked about members giving craft talks or on what they're doing. Some clubs are doing that so that other members know what their membership is all about, and maybe be able to refer them to somebody. So let's see, what else did I have? Oh yes, the other thing that came up was in Saskatchewan, the counting. Some accountants there are trying to help Indigenous students become interested in accounting and other professional areas. So they're being able to work with Indigenous students, which is a pretty good thing to do if you can have access to that. So that's about it. I guess just having students come and shadow a Rotarian for a day or two was another area that they were talking about. So that's what we were talking about.
Great, thank you. Fred's group, please.
Yeah, Lorna King from Regina, Skaya. There were lots of good ideas shared. Gail asked for one. One of the Rotarians in our group, and I didn't write down the name or the club, but spoke about their own vocational background in the medical system, and using that in the club to evaluate what were the needs within the community. And the club has helped with building a heliport, and they're currently working on getting a CT scanner for the community. So a very concrete example of applying vocational service as a service basis. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And Paulette's group.
It's Nancy Cosway from the Rotary Club of Winnipeg. And one of the things I think we've came to realize in our discussions is that you often don't think the things you're doing are vocational service, and they are. Going to businesses, helping students better themselves to get jobs, to do interviews, and just make it simple. Don't think of high and lofty things, but vocational service can often be quite simple things that you do. Visiting a business for lunch and informing them of Rotary and how Rotary and what people can do with their own vocation if they join Rotary.
Okay, great. And Srini's group, our ninth group.
Well, I can speak if nobody else does. I've got one quick thing that this is Ron Nordstrom from Neepawa. One of our people in the group mentioned that everyone has had a vocation, but they also have hobbies. And if we're going to have some sort of talks or something like that, we can do vocation talks, but looking deeper into that person and looking at the things maybe you don't know about that person, maybe some hobby they might have. So yeah, that was an idea that has not been discussed yet.
Thanks. Back to you, Gail Marie.
Thank you, Patty, and thank you, everybody. It sounded very interesting, and I'll look forward to getting all the notes if people would send them to me, because sounds like there's a great idea, some great ideas to share. I should just mention, I forgot to mention when we started that this would be a meeting which is probably an hour and a half because of having all of the people on board and wanting to hear the various talks. So just so you know, we will be on here for a bit yet. And Tony, did you want to do any kind of wrap up? I know you were in one of the breakout groups. Do you want to say anything to close off your ideas bank idea?
No, I've nothing specific to say apart from I think we've had some, you've obviously had some good discussion in each of the groups, and that's what it's all about. It's about sharing. There isn't one right or wrong answer to this thing. It's how you do it. And as I say, I think and it's been mentioned a few times, it really underpins all we do. And there's some mention in the chat, for example, we need to value everybody's vocation at whatever it is. You don't have to be a professional. It's whatever skill and talent you have. So it is very much in the wider sense is vocational. And we sometimes get hooked occasionally talking about professionals. Well, there are many other people who are leaders in our community or good people in our community who are not inverted commas professionals. So I think that's a powerful message just to come across in itself. But the important thing about sessions like these, you have the opportunity to discuss. The breakout rooms are great for that. And so I thank you all for participating. I will send a soft copy of the Ideas Bank that we have to your DG, and then she can circulate it with the ideas that you've added to it today. So I think if you do that, you'll have a really good record of this evening and some of the things that you can think about. And the Ideas Bank that I was involved in preparing is something you can just dip in and dip out of. It isn't a prescription. It's just some ideas, and some you like, some you don't, and you can just dip in and look at it whenever you like. But it is to try and put some clarity about this subject that a lot of people have difficulty understanding. And the real reason why it's difficult understanding, we're simply using our skills and talents in every thing we do within the Rotary movement. And we don't stop and think back how we're doing that. And thank you again for inviting me. I enjoyed it. Made me rethink what I was going to say and redraft a talk to you. So that was good. And you were a dummy run for me because I've been asked to speak at another club next week. So we will learn from the experience I've had with you this evening, and we'll adapt it, and improve it for next week. So thank you for allowing me to do that.
Thank you, Tony. I'm glad we gave you a practice run. You're welcome. Let's keep going. We've had a lot of ideas and discussion about practical vocational service in our clubs, either with local projects, or let's move on to international projects. We probably, all of you know that there is a group in Rotary called Vocational Training Teams. It evolved over the years from the group study exchange that used to take a group of young professionals with a Rotarian and go to another country and learn about their professions. Vocational Training Team kind of streamlined that so that everybody would be from the same vocation. You'd get a lot more out of the experience, but more importantly, where you went for that team, they would get a lot more out of it because it was concentrated in one vocation. So I'm going to call on Nancy Cosway, president of Winnipeg Club. You heard her briefly before. And Nancy was part of a vocational training team that went to Ethiopia in 2015. And it was a group, it was a very large team. It was very challenging because it was our first vocational training team, but 10 teachers went to Ethiopia. And I'm going to hand it over to Nancy. And everyone else will be muted, of course.
Okay, I'm not muted now. Sorry about that. Thank you. I'm the incoming president, Gail Marie. So I'm not quite the president. So anyway, I'm going to try and pack in here in 3 or 4 minutes what we did in 5 weeks, which is kind of hard, but we'll see how we get there. So we went to Ethiopia for the 5 weeks. We were up in Bahir Dar, which is in the northern part of Ethiopia. And there were 8 team members to my recollection. 5 were from Manitoba and 4 were from Saskatchewan. I think there was 1 or 2 that had been selected, but for some reason at the very beginning had to drop out. One was a woman that had a health problem, and I've forgotten what the other one was. And we had all kinds of skills in that group. We had music, art, math, science, English, special education, but I was the only person that was not a trained teacher. But I was there to look after the hygiene and sanitation education events. So we arrived in Addis. We went one day with the Addis Ababa West Rotary Club and had a nice lunch with them. And they were the ones that we had connections with to do the work up in the north with the education people. We then took off for 550 kilometers from Addis to Ababa. It was a beautiful drive. The road wasn't great all the way, but we had a great time. The 8 of us didn't really know each other before we landed in, I guess we had an orientation and we got to know a little bit there, but we really didn't know each other well till we got to Addis. And so we got to know each other really well on the trip. What were we to do when we went there? Well, we were to mentor the teachers at the school. So we wanted to increase their creativity, their planning, and their way to interact with the students. Through that, enhanced lesson plans. And then my job was to promote hand washing with soap and to address the menstrual hygiene issues. So our transport to school from our hotel was these little trucks. The schools, one school you could walk to it. There were 3 different schools we went to. The students were crammed in their classrooms. There were little bit of lighting. They didn't have a lot of resources, but the teachers were very welcoming. When they saw us there, they were quite happy. They wanted to learn from us. They wanted us to be involved with their classes. So those were the 3 schools that we went to. One was a secondary school at the bottom with all the kids lined up before they went in class. And the other 2 were primary schools. One had a disability class, class of old disabled kids. And one of our teachers that went out was a special education person, so he went there. And the other one were primary schools. But there were challenges, of course. Language was one of them. The teachers all could speak English to varying degrees. None of them were all that fluent, and they did teach English in the school, but it wasn't a great way to teach with them. So sometimes if you wanted to explain something really well, you had to use the teacher to interpret to the kids. As I said, lack of resources. There wasn't a lot of understanding of games and creativity. One of the other difficulties was the teachers had a curriculum to follow. And if they didn't follow that curriculum, which was evaluated on a weekly basis by the principal, they were in trouble. So if we were trying to take some class time to do something creative that didn't quite fit into that curriculum, it was a bit of a challenge. And the other thing was that the teachers at one, especially the high school, they taught in the morning. And then because salaries were so poor, they went and had a second job. So to take them out of their job was also a challenge. But we did have some success and enjoyment. The kids were keen. They were keen to learn something. There was music classes. There was story times. So in spite of all those challenges, there was still a lot of enjoyment. Used cards to teach math. We had a snakes and ladders game to teach hygiene. We did games with the kids. There's the snakes and ladders. The school set up hand washing with soap stations because there were none at the school where the toilets were. So those were successes. An offshoot was gardening. Someone got some money from Canada and went out and bought gardening tools so the kids could grow foods and vegetables for their lunches. I had taken a bunch of, I think it was over 100 Days for Girls packs. So those were distributed to the girls in the school. So that was a really good success. So we left teaching aids with the kids. We provided feedback. They felt that their confidence was enhanced. They were able to continue teaching the recorder. The hand washing with soap was set up, and there was an increased understanding of the menstrual hygiene issues. And the high school had designated a room where the girls could go and relax if they were having menstrual cramps or they needed to change and clean themselves up, those kinds of things. So those things were all very, very positive. And we just wanted to thank, I think the whole team wants to thank the coordinating committee that selected us and the Ethiopians that we worked with, as well as the Rotary Club in Addis. And there was a Rotaract Club in Baradar that we made connections with, and they were the ones that were going to follow up on the gardening. So it was overall a wonderful experience. We learned a lot. Ethiopia isn't a terribly easy country to work in because of the political situation. And even then it was difficult. Teachers couldn't speak out. Their salaries were poor, but they couldn't say anything or they'd be put in jail. So again, thanks for a wonderful experience.
Thank you so much, Nancy. And I wonder if anybody has a comment or question. If you want to just unmute yourself, you can ask Nancy.
Nancy, how many were Rotarians and how many were not Rotarian?
Sorry? The question got broken up.
I said, how many were Rotarians and how many were not?
Oh, we were all Rotarians.
How many were Rotarians and how many were not Rotarians?
The whole team was
Okay.
Rotarians. The whole team, all of us, 8. Did you get that?
That was Dave Bennett, and he is in charge of the Rotary Friendship Exchange now.
Well, yes, it was. I thought there were some non-Rotarians with it. I must be mistaken. I'm sorry.
Not with that first group, there wasn't. They were all Rotarians, Dave. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Does anybody else have a question of Nancy?
How was communication? Did they all understand English, or what's the national language in Ethiopia?
Well, the teachers did speak English to varying degrees. Some of them spoke English very well, and some of them struggled a bit. They did teach English in the school, but if the teacher's English wasn't that good, the children didn't learn to speak it. They could read it, a lot of them, but they couldn't speak it well, most of the students. I had to use a lot of sign language when I was doing my teaching and drawing pictures on the board.
The pictures you showed of the landscape, it looked pretty green. I always think of Ethiopia as just sand and rocks and desert.
Yeah.
I guess we were there during when it wasn't the actual driest season, and we weren't there during a famine either. So there wasn't that dry earth.
Good presentation. Thanks, Nancy.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Nancy? If not, I want to thank you very much, Nancy, for giving us your perspective on the vocational training team experience that you had. Well done. And as I recall it, there were a lot of successes with that group, but it was a difficult process to get to those successes. So there's always a lot of problems, of course. And so we have another example of a VTT, and I'm going to turn now to Ron Nordstrom of Nipawa Club. And Ron was part of a vocational training team that went to Guatemala under the leadership of Viva Vida. And I know that Mariette Baker McDermott is on the call here tonight, Ron. She's a non-Rotarian, but she was part of your group. So we're going to hand it over to Ron Nordstrom.
Yeah, she was on the call. I don't know if she's still there. And I think Carolyn Hudson's on the call as well. So we were a team of 6 that went to Guatemala. And that was in 2017 in January. We went for 4 weeks. And this was the team here. We had Eva and Doris and Carolyn, myself, and Mariette and Margaret. That's the 6 of us there. I'm going to start this presentation here, but I'm not talking about specific slides. I'm just going to be talking in general, and we'll let the slides run through.
Okay.
We were in a tiny school called Hoya Verde, in a tiny little village just very close to Guatemala City. We spent a month in the classrooms, and just like Nancy's group, we were supposed to take a look at mentoring the teachers. They were looking for a more student-centered approach and a hands-on approach to learning. And so that was, from what we understood, that was our task. When we got there, we certainly did that, and we did much more, which I may have time to talk about, and we'll see. Definitely, it was a life-changing experience for me. For one thing, to be able to use my skills as a teacher in another part of the world to make a positive difference. That was just an absolute thrill. And it was really eye-opening to see what Rotary does in some of the poorest countries in the world. So it was just a fantastic experience. One thing you should know, that this is actually a school that Rotary built. So these teachers and the students were not new to Rotary. When we walked in there, we were like conquering heroes coming in. We were greeted, and we were just treated so great by the kids and by the staff, by the other Rotary groups that we connected with down there as well. So certainly Rotary was well known, and Canada was well known to the kids and the teachers down there. We had the same challenge that Nancy had. Language was my biggest problem, my biggest challenge, and probably the biggest challenge for all of us. The teachers spoke no English at all. We all tried to learn Spanish to varying successes, and I don't think I did a very great job, but we were very fortunate to have 3 university students, and sometimes we had 2, sometimes we had 3 in a day who would interpret for us. We also occasionally had Rotarians who would come and visit us at the schools and interpret for us as well. But there were 6 of us, and often 3 interpreters. So we were constantly trying to grab an interpreter, because fortunately I had Google Translate on my iPhone, and I communicated mostly by Google Translate. I would type something in, see what it was in Spanish, try to pronounce it, and then all the kids would giggle at me. So I don't really know what I said most of the time, but we had a lot of fun.
Ron, I don't mean to interject, but do you know that your slides are not running? We're still on the first slide.
Oh, because
Yeah.
on mine, they're running like crazy. So
No, they're not.
okay, I'm going to do it a little bit differently then.
Sorry.
Stop this one. Thanks for telling me.
Okay.
You're probably tired of seeing those 6 people. I'm going to try it this way and see what happens. Is it running now?
Yes.
Okay, we'll do it that way. Okay, so, well, thanks for letting me know. So the biggest surprise for me was the lack of resources. Like Nancy talked about, there was no photocopier at the school. There was not enough paper, whiteboard. They had whiteboards, but they had, the teachers guarded their markers like it was, the most valuable thing in the room, and it probably was. They didn't have enough textbooks, gym equipment, nothing like this. In fact, if a teacher wanted photocopies, they would go into the city to a print shop and get photocopies made, and that were very expensive. And it was all on the teacher's dollars. So when we came in there, we saw teachers writing tons of notes on the board and the kids taking tons of notes. This is a K-6 school, and I was working with mostly the grade 6 kids. They spent a lot of their day taking notes. One of the things we did down there, we worked in the classroom and worked on hands-on learning with cards, as you see here, bingo, markers, all sorts of things for word games, things like that. But one of the most valuable things we probably did was we brought a photocopier in and made a deal with a local Rotary club that they would make sure it was maintained and make sure that there was paper for that photocopier, because it was really hard for us to convince the teachers that they needed to spend less time writing on the board and have their kids take notes when there was no other way for the kids to get the notes. So that photocopier helped a lot in our cause, for sure. Some of the things we did down there, our main concern was to make sure that whatever we did was sustainable when we left. And so we showed the teachers how to be creative with sustainable and inexpensive materials like transparencies, paper plates, for student whiteboards. Like Nancy's group, we used playing cards, poker chips. We created bead strings for math and many other hands-on experiences for the kids. That's what we came there to do. And we found out, like, that whole ripple effect thing, we came there to do one thing and we ended up doing so many other things. I'll just mention a few of them here. One thing that floored me, we arranged to have birth certificates for students. We arranged meetings so that students could get birth certificates, because some kids that were 10 years old and never attended school because they didn't have a birth certificate. So we actually succeeded while we were there in getting some birth certificates so kids could come to the school for the first time in their lives. We bought a lot of school supplies for them, things like transparencies, skipping ropes, balls. One of the things we discovered that there was textbooks, boxes of textbooks, library books, and gym equipment there that were unopened. When we asked about them, it was explained that the equipment belonged to the government. And at the end of the year, whatever was broken or missing would come out of the principal's salary. And so even though the equipment was there, they were afraid to use it, because if somebody walked off with a soccer ball, there goes a day's wage or maybe a week's wage for a principal. So they were very reluctant to use it. So we used some of our funds to get some of those kinds of things so that the kids had some resources to use. My personal background is phys ed, art, technology, and you see in some of these pictures that are flying by that I was able to do some of those things. One of the things I noticed when I first got there was their phys ed classes mostly consisted of one person doing something or two people doing something and everybody else standing around watching, and then it was somebody else's turn. And so they were not very active. And so one of my things that I introduced was high energy, lots of movement, everybody moving at the same time, games that didn't require any equipment or very little equipment, or equipment that they already had. So we had an interesting time. A lot of the teachers or the people that went on this trip either went back and visited the school again on their own, or continued to communicate with those with that school through email or whatever. And so we've had some connections with that group in the years since. it was really beneficial to go to talk to my club, explain to my club the kinds of experiences and the kinds of things that are going on down there. And it's so easy for us now to convince our club that we should contribute to the Ripple Effect program annually. And there's also other things going on in Hoya Verde School, for example, the water and sanitation project that happened, I believe, last year. And so club can't make a difference everywhere in the world, but our club is trying to make a difference, at least in Hoya Verde. That's about it. If there's any questions.
Thanks very much, Ron. And as he said, are there any questions or comments to Ron?
Yeah, I was just wondering about the birth certificate. Colin and I are with the Ripple Effect that go down to Guatemala and get resources together for schools. And I'm just wondering if you recall how much the birth certificate was.
I don't recall. It was a couple of years ago, and Eva was the one that was going after that. And I know she had to talk to lawyers and all sorts of people to finally get something done. So I don't know the cost.
Gail Marie, Rod, thank you very much for your presentation. Guatemala is a soft spot in my heart, and seeing these children and your involvement with them is just so warming, and I congratulate you for your good work and those of your colleagues in Guatemala.
Thank you.
Ron, what's nice to see on every single picture, all the kids, all the parents, crisp, clean. I didn't see any ripped jeans or anything like that. It just tells me that they sure are respectful of the school and that they're and respectful of the teachers. It just seems so different than what we have here in Canada.
You know, you're absolutely right. And when we were there, it poured a couple of days. It rained, and if you could see the village is mud streets, mud everywhere, and their buildings are largely corrugated metal around some sort of frame and largely mud floors. And as you look out in the village, there's clotheslines everywhere with clean clothes hanging everywhere. And on some of those days, I couldn't figure out how the kids actually got to school with clean white clothes, because just getting out of their bed and walking around their house, they must have got filthy. So I was pretty impressed with the cleanliness. And you know, your economic status has nothing to do with how much you care about presenting yourself, for sure.
Carolyn Hudson, make some comments.
Ron, look in the chat. There's a question from Keith Fonsted.
Not sure why I don't have chat.
Okay.
Yeah, I can speak.
I'll read it to you. VTT, whoops.
Fred, I can ask it. Fred.
Yeah, go. Thanks.
So I was on a GSE with Brenda, who's on the call here, and so that was kind of the last GSE I think we did, which had different professions in it. And so when this changed to the VTT, it seems to me a little more suitable for certain professions. We've had 2 examples of the teachers. I could see it working, say, with a medical, whether it's nurses or doctors or something. But outside of those 2 professions, I guess I struggle with seeing how it would work. I was thinking that you've lived it, or Nancy, do you see it working with other professions besides maybe those 2?
You know, taking a look at, and somebody's mentioned here already, construction. That's one of the things that I would think of right away. Construction techniques, I suppose, but certainly medical and all parts of medical. You know, dentistry. You know, including all of those kinds of things.
If I could interject too, as VTT chair, I've been in touch with other VTT chairs across the zone, and there are very many professions taking VTT trips. There are engineers, there are accountants or financial people doing micro banking and setting up small businesses for people, especially in Africa. There are, as Ron said, all sorts of medical ones. There are and there are a number of VTTs that go both ways. So they bring specialists, they bring training specialists in for training into Canada and the United States, for example, and then they go back, and so it's a train the trainer kind of VTT. So it is feasible, and having instituted it in our district, I can tell you that it takes probably a good year and a half to get a VTT organized. Bob Dursons will agree with this when we look at global grants for VTTs. So, you know, we're not, especially with COVID, we're not going to be looking at a VTT in this next year. But if we want to be looking at one in a year or two, then we have to start putting your ideas forward now. And I know that there is a group that out of Manitoba and Ontario that have talked about a medical VTT with physios and whatever. And there is an example of that. A group went down to Mexico to with wheelchairs, with the wheelchair project that we have. And they went down to fix wheelchairs and to show people how to fix them. So like Ron and Nancy were both saying, the goal is to be sustainable. For whatever you do, it's not just what you're doing right at the time of the VTT, but you're wanting it to continue after you leave and to just provide that support. So are there any other comments or questions about VTT?
Yeah, I have a question. In this ripple effect, what are the criteria in choosing the countries to visit for vocational service?
Ripple effect itself is in Guatemala only, but the VTT are in various countries. And the criteria is that you have to do a needs assessment. And if you have, and you have to have a contact in that country. So there has to be a host and there has to be a sponsor. So of a club or a district in both countries. And then you do a needs assessment to see what the needs are to prove that that VTT needs to work. And Rob McGuire is saying too that there's a lot of agriculture VTTs. Thanks, Rob. Yes. Does that answer your question?
I did, Bob. I just want to comment that these VTT teams were able to go out back when our district had a lot of district designated funds because nobody was doing global grants, and the contributions to the foundation were more significant than they are today. If we want to really proceed and are serious about a VT group going out in a year or two, it means in the year that we're going to do a VT team, there will be probably nobody is going to be able to do a global grant because we're down to almost an either or in terms of being able to fund, because our contributions to the annual fund are getting less and less each year and so going forward, if we want to do things, we've got to put more money into the foundation so that we can do the things that we would like to do. So that's just my plug to say, we're looking, we want to do lots of good, but we do need the dollars to go with it. And it's kind of sad that at the end of December this year, we're like $22,000 less than last year at this time for foundation giving. So the idea that we're going to be able to do continue at the same level with global grants and district grants is really not feasible based on the givings that our clubs are putting into the annual fund.
Okay, thank
actually
you.
If we want to do these things, we got to put some money in the pot.
Okay, thanks, Bob. I think we all heard that. Let's get donating. We're coming to the end of our time, and I want to be able to ask Ken Singer, because he was going to give us a personal story about how his vocation has impacted his Rotary life and vice versa. So Ken, if you would just unmute yourself and give us a brief look at your slant on things.
Sure. Thank you, Gil Marie. And good evening, everybody. And yeah, how has being a Rotarian enabled me to align my professional career with Rotary's principles and the four-way test? Some of you may know that I spent all of my working life in the radio broadcasting business. For more than half of my career, I was in charge of all operations of our 4 radio stations and about 50 employees located in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC. Like most every retail business, our stations depended on our customers for our success and our livelihood. Radio's customers are comprised of listeners and advertisers. And if you only had one of those two, you could not survive in this very competitive landscape. Our primary goals were to serve both segments of our customer base. So we successfully achieved this by providing our listeners with locally relevant on-air content every day. And we served our advertiser clients by identifying and developing marketing solutions to help them grow their businesses. Upon joining Rotary quite a few years ago, I learned that the 4-way test has a long-standing reputation as a go-to for Rotary members when they have found themselves in difficult situations. And it soon occurred to me that the 4-way test and the Rotarian Code of Conduct are extremely adaptable as an ethical and an effective guide for anyone as we deal with our personal and professional relationships. I think that there's nothing that life and running a business can throw at you that can't be addressed through the lenses of fellowship, empathy, accountability, and trust. And that is the 4-way test. When you think about it, you can't help but be astounded how the power of 4 questions and 24 words can be applied to resolving conflicts. At the same time, the 4-way test provides a unique approach and a process to solve problems and make decisions to achieve desired outcomes. In business and in life, the 4-way test has helped me to be more successful in reaching mutually beneficial, sustainable, and scalable solutions. And just quickly to run through them, will it build goodwill and better friendships? We're talking about fellowship. And our business, and I think every business, succeeds by building and fostering relationships. Will it be beneficial to all concerned? And this is all about empathy. I used to tell my sales and marketing teams that if you have an open mind and a curiosity for new ideas and different points of view, you'll meet the challenges that our advertiser clients are facing by coming up with mutually beneficial solutions that are sustainable and adaptable. And is it fair to all concerned? Well, I think this is the golden rule in life and in business: accountability. In the context of reaching shared goals, we must always try to understand the other points of view. And is it the truth? This is all about trust. If you're truly helping your customers find solutions to their problems, be a trusted problem solver. So I truly believe the 4-way test can be adapted into the culture of your business. It takes into account everyone's point of view and concerns, as well as their needs and wants. And the process is designed to build goodwill and earn trust. So a particular end result is mutually beneficial, it's sustainable, and the results are end up in positive outcomes. So thank you for this opportunity, and great to see this many on the call tonight, Gil-Marie.
Thank you so much, Ken. It's nice to end on a high note. And I should just say that Rob McGuire has a great idea in the chat, and he's talking about a virtual VTT, because right now he's watching his son do group work with university students all over across Canada and Asia. So that's really something that we can explore over this next while, because of the uncertainty of the times that we are going to be involved with COVID restrictions. So thank you all tonight, and thanks for staying on to the end here for most of you. I'd like to say a special thank you to our speakers, to Tony and Nancy and Ron, and to Ken, and to our tech people, Ken Singer and Patty Van, and Fred was monitoring the chat, and to all of you for joining us tonight. These chats are all, these evening talk shows are all about who joins and how we can stay connected with each other. And that's why they're so important in these times. So our next evening talk show is February 4th. It's always the first Thursday of the month. And the monthly theme for February is Peace and Conflict Prevention Resolution. So that should prove a very interesting one as well. So thank you all. And Ken is going to play the four-way test song for us, because as we go out into our worlds personally or in business or your careers tomorrow, remember the four-way test, and have a good evening, everybody.
Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build good? Will it better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? When we pay it forward, it will be returned.